Um, one of the more interesting concepts, this one museum uh, would have a nighttime dinner train service, and so that tended to be both beneficial for the operating crews as well as volunteers that were about, people that were, members that were up there for to enjoy the wintertime festivities, etc., as well as a significant revenue generation for the museum. Now, during routine operations, there would be two. One was an old cafe lounge car off of that was built as a cafe lounge. Another was a uh, private business car that was tacked on the end of the train. Pardon me for a moment. Uh, um, they were tacked on the end of the train. We called it first class service. You would have hors d'oeuvre style, meat plate style snacks. Non-alcoholic drinks were available, things like that, and you could sit and lounge and watch the scenery go by, as compared to the regular coach service that was pretty much just the normal train trip with regular coaches. For the dinner train service, only those two cars were occupied by passengers, and so we'd tend to order a whole stack of pizzas from one of the local, I think it was Pizza Hut, Pizza Pit, Domino's, something like that. One of the local major chains, and so we'd have like five or six, or I think one time it was 12 pizzas in the combine car for the operating crew, the volunteers, people about. A whole host of different kinds of sodas available. Um, for those that were off duty, Rule G did not apply. There's Rule G stories as well. But once you start out, everything was happening after dark. And so it made the trip far different. Not just because the context of seeing the headlight cut through the darkness and knowing where the line was, but once in a while, and this happened fairly frequently in years past, um, snow would start falling as soon as dusk hit, and so because the dinner train service would be like 7 p.m. 8 p.m., you would actually have a fair covering of snow on the rails and the countryside, depending on how much it started snowing by the time the dinner train service started. Um, I myself was usually in the combine, or if I could be in the cab or things like that. It depended on who was running, what was going on. And one of the fun things is it's a very, I would say unique, but it's not exactly unique. It gave you a sense of history, that you were living history by operating this train, the steam locomotive, through the countryside, snow falling, um, everything muffled slightly because of the density of the atmosphere. And it made you think of the stories that you hear or read of when steam was in actual operation, was when this was a routine daily occurrence rather than an event. Um, to see the headlight, and I mean, these are incandescent headlights. There are no ditch lights. There are no, nothing like that. 32-volt. So you see this yellowish headlight cutting through the falling snow, and you see deer tracks across or along or between the rails. Um, More than a couple times, we just well, this particular oil-fired locomotive had one particular clank on the engineer side that would it, we knew exactly what it was, and it was because um, railroads, especially in the later days of steam, tended to swap parts in from other dead locomotives to fix a problem. And so the one part, no two steam locomotives were made identically, so parts weren't exactly hot swappable like for internal combustion engines or anything. So this made this one particular part, I think it was like 1/8 or It's either an eighth inch too long or eighth inch too short. I don't remember which. So there had to be compensatory uh, setup with the frame, the driving boxes, etc. And this clank would be exacerbated during uh, cold weather because of the need for excess play in the mechanism to make up for this one semi mismatched part. You wouldn't think an eighth of an inch would be that great when you're supposed to have at least a 16th inch of slop in locomotive mechanisms, but in this case, the mechanical differential and everything else made it so. So you'd be clanking along, and all of a sudden you'd run up into like three deer walking along the right of way in the snow, and they'd just look and walk a little faster ahead of you. It wasn't as though they were scared of the iron horse, because even with the headlight and everything like that, they treated it as part of the environment because they'd heard it so often. Not only that day, but just in their existence in the immediate vicinity of the railroad. Uh, Hearing the whistle echo off the hills, because like I said, there's bluffs and ridges along here. Hear the whistle echo off the hills, seemingly for miles that you wouldn't be able to hear during the day. Um, it's a very worthwhile experience, and um, we had a resistor set in the cab lights so that you can have cab lights at full brightness or partial brightness. That way, so the engineer and fireman could see ahead of them in the darkness more easily. Um, if you turned out the platform lights on the coaches, you could actually just read the pressure gauge on the locomotive without any hesitation, which I occasionally do for the owner when he'd be a little concerned because you'd have all these shifting volunteer crews, and some people knew more of what they needed to do with the locomotive than other people. And being as how it eventually collapsed down into just one man owning it, and it became his baby. I mean, there's no hesitation or reservation about that. And so if we were running a little slow or something like that, he'd be going, "Oh, well, what's the pressure?" And so me being younger, wouldn't mind going up and you know, oh, it's at whatever, 120. I think 160 was center on that gauge. So it'd be like 150, 120, 130, whatever. Um, a lot of times it was because the fireman wasn't exactly used to firing a oil locomotive, or there was some of the myriad of things that would go wrong during colder weather. And so, if it wasn't unreasonable, he'd go, okay, fine. And a couple of times I recall him actually going out on the platform, undoing the safety chain, going across to the tender tank, climbing up the ladder, and climbing across to have a word with whoever was in the cab while the whole thing was running. Yeah, that's sort of not appropriate for Federal Road Administration regulations, but hey, welcome to reality with steam locomotives. But the wintertime experience is an experience to be had, especially if you have the chance to do so. Um, at any rate, I'm going to stop this one here, and I think that'll be it for this round of Tales from the Roundhouse, and thank you for listening.